You thought we'd leave you hanging after part one? Year two receivers, part two. Let's go.
Let's go.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. We're your hosts, Calvin Timms and Dale Terry, and we're excited to be back with another great episode going through part two of the year two wide receivers. We talked about part one a couple of weeks ago, so hopefully you guys check that video out. If not, you can hear the first 8. We kind of went by draft position from last year, but we talked about the first 8. Today we're going to talk about 9. We're going to give you an extra one here today, but we got a few guys we want to talk about, and I'm pretty excited. There's a lot of good names, a lot of names that people are hyping up right now and are starting to get a little bit of steam and traction. And man, wide receivers are just deeper than ever. It's a good time. And, you know, we were just talking before the podcast started. Justin Jefferson just got paid $35 million per year for the next 4 years.
He got paid a lot of money to catch passes from J.J. McCarthy.
I mean, that seems like fair compensation. I would want a lot of money to get.
It's actually very fair compensation for what he has to do.
I'd want a lot of money to catch passes from J.J. McCarthy too. So, you know, going from Kirk Cousins to J.J. is it's not going to help his Hall of Fame career. I have a feeling. So we'll see. But before we get into the video, how you doing today, Dale?
Hey, I'm doing really well. Feeling good. It's beginning of June, so all the summer stuff's going on, and I'm just really excited to talk about these year two wide receivers, and some are obviously some studs, and others are some definite duds.
Yeah, there's some fun names. There's some fun names here today. But no, it's like you said, it's June. It's getting hotter out there. Summer's finally here, it feels like, and it's a good time. So hopefully you guys are all having a good summer and you got some fun vacations and stuff lined up for you. But if not, you can spend your summer with us, as we're going to be going through all these different teams and rankings and lots of breakdowns all summer long. So thank you guys for checking us out. If you're new, please subscribe to the channel. We appreciate you. If you're one of our returning listeners, please leave a comment down below. Let us know that you like our content or anything that's on your mind. If you hate it, let us know down below too. I don't care. Just leave a comment. Any comment is good comment. That's what they say in media, I think. I don't know. I didn't go to media school, so
it's definitely something. If we do something wrong or whatever, like, just let us know. Like, if we're wrong about a fact or on a take, just feel free to tell us. We'd love to hear it.
When Dale's wrong every time, you can always
let me know.
You can always tell him.
Sometimes I need to be humbled.
Yeah.
Every now and again,
Yeah. It's true. Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me.
That's true.
So, all right. Podcast is available. If you are listening to this podcast, I implore you guys to go over to the YouTube channel, Dynasty After Dark YouTube channel. Subscribe to the video again. Leave a comment. Like the video. It just helps us out, and we appreciate you guys. We're going to be doing more of the team breakdowns. Maybe I'll get Dale in on a couple of these as we go forward as well. I've done a few different teams, kind of given a holistic approach to those. Those are always fun because you don't have to talk about specific rankings, but I talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers and how literally every player on that team is undervalued right now, which is absolutely nuts. But no, if you like that kind of content, or if you have a specific team you want us to do a breakdown on, leave a comment down below and I will get to it eventually. This is usually the time of year where we start doing all of our full team recaps from last year. I don't think we're going to do that this year. I think this year we're going to do a little bit more like I've been doing it, kind of breaking down the offense for each team just in one little video on and off, and we'll kind of pepper those in here and there as we go through the rest of the offseason. But again, if you have a specific team you want to hear, leave it down below, and we'd be happy to get to that at some point. Also, if you can, follow us over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin, at FF After Dark for the podcast, and Dynasty_Dale for my co-host here. And that's pretty much all I've got. So you ready to jump into it, Dale?
Let's dive right in.
All right. We're going to start, last time we went through the top 8 which was Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Jonathan Mingo, Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice, and Marvin Mims. So that was basically all the first and second round wide receivers taken in 2023. If you want any of our thoughts, go check that video out again on the YouTube channel or Spotify, Google, wherever you're listening to the podcast, and you can hear all of our thoughts on those players. But today we're going to start with the number one pick that is in CJ's heart is Tank Dell, Nathaniel Dell, taken at 306 by the Houston Texans. Had a stellar rookie season. I did not expect this from him. I'm a sizist. I'm not afraid to admit it, but geez Louise, man, Tank Dell just came out on fire, through 11 games before I think he broke his leg, right? If I remember correctly.
I believe so, yeah.
It was an actual break, which are super rare for these guys. They have so much muscle and everything, but he played 10.
And with that, like, I honestly feel that's better than airing something because,
Yes.
like, at least it's
Less-
going to mend and it's
Yeah.
it's going to heal right, and I feel there's a much quicker return to the field, which is really important to.
Yeah, for sure. He's able to get back to OTAs and all that stuff, and you don't have to go through all the rehab of strengthening the muscle and all that stuff. It's just, you got to strengthen the muscle a little bit, but it's not like it's learning how to survive again from
Right.
all the beatings that they take. But no, through so Tank Dell played basically 10 games. He played 13 snaps and one, had no targets, and that was the game that he broke his leg. But so he played 10 games and had 47 catches in those 10 games for 709 yards, averaged 9.5 yards per target, 15 yards per catch. He was an explosive nightmare down the field. 7 touchdowns in 10 games as a rookie with CJ Stroud. And you got to think too, like, week 1, he had 3 catches for 34 yards before he started to kind of come on after that. I can only imagine what this team would have done if he would have not been injured and was there for the playoff run. Obviously Nico Collins stepped up. They just paid Nico Collins a ton of money. They traded for Stephon Diggs. They traded a decent amount for Diggs just to make him a 1-year rental. They traded for Joe Mixon, upgraded that side as well. They re-signed Dalton Schultz, drafted Cade Stover. This offense is rolling, man, and you'll love to see it for the Houston Texans, but where does that leave Tank Dell in your mind and what he's going to be able to do from a fantasy production standpoint? Are you worried?
I'm a little concerned, like they did add quite a bit of guys. Adding Diggs is a big thing. Like, he is a big mouth to feed, obviously.
He's a big mouth,
he
that's
is.
for sure.
He is. So yeah, I think I'm still not super worried because I feel Stroud has a really good connection with Tank Dell, and I think that's going to reign true this year. But I don't think. I mean, like, even if like one of these guys gets 1,500 yards, like, I think Stroud's going to throw for a bunch of yards this year. Or, probably closer to, I'm thinking like 4,500, which like it is a pretty good amount. So, like, there's still, if like Collins gets 1,500, like, there's still 3,000 yards to go around with these. So
Yeah.
I'm not super worried. I think his touchdowns they may like plateau a little bit. Like, he might be between like 5 and 8, which that's still not that bad, but he's still going to get the yardage. Like, he's still going to get some targets. Like, he seemed to be like the downfield guy quite a bit. It felt like at times with Stroud. So I'm really excited for the Texans offense and to see what they do. I believe they surprised a lot of people last year with how well they did and how well their everything came together. So, yes, I'm a little worried about Tank Dell, but I'm not off of him quite yet.
Sure. Now, he's currently ranked number 21, wide receiver number 21.
Okay.
And, he's right around the likes of Zay Flowers, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, T. Higgins, George Pickens. And honestly, again, I'm a little bit of a sizist, but
I wouldn't say a little bit, Calvin. You are
Hey,
a
I'm
size.
not that big
It
of a
is what it is.
sizist. I like Hollywood Brown. He's smaller, you know. I like a fewer smaller guys. But no, I do like Tank Dell, and I think that he's good. And I think this is a fair ranking for him. I do
Yes,
think it's
I
a
agree.
fair ranking.
Agreed.
The caveat here, though, the George Pickens, you know, he's at wide receiver 24. I talked about him in the Pittsburgh video, so you can hear my thoughts a little bit more extensively there. If George Pickens hits, man, he's got top 12 potential versus I think this is kind of the ceiling of where Tank is going to be. Like, I don't think
Sure.
him and Nico are going to be, there might be years where one is a top 12 guy and the other one is a top 24 guy where they kind of alternate between wide receiver 1 and 2. And I could see it being 1 year it's Tank, 1 year it's Nico, and then the next is completely reversed. But I don't think he's going to be consistently a top 12 guy. Whereas George Pickens, if he hits, you know, we know what he can do. He is just such a monster compared to someone like he's a more traditional X versus a Tank Dell, right? Which is why I'd rather have him over Tank Dell, even though he's rated behind him. DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, both of these guys are the number ones for their team, and that's why I'd rather have them versus a Tank Dell. So personally, I'd be cashing out on Dell right now just because I think the value that you can get for him, I won't say it'll never be higher because, again, if this year, if he comes out and he improves on last year, and let's say he finishes as the wide receiver 12, 13, 10, somewhere in that range, right? His value is going to spike even higher, but in a year's time, I don't think he'll be able to repeat that. And then let's say he finishes in 2025 as the wide receiver number 20. I just think it's going to be a very up and down career for Tank Dell where, again, if DJ Moore with Caleb Williams, we don't know what that could be, but man, that could be a lot of fun. DK Metcalf, if he can get back to where he was just a couple years ago with Geno Smith, man, these guys have the ability to just absolutely dominate for fantasy. So I think he's a little bit of a sell personally, but I do
Sure.
like the player. And it just seems like I'm a hater, but I just think that the other guys have higher upside than Tank Dell, where maybe Dell has a little bit higher floor than them comparatively.
Yeah, and I see that, but I think I want some pieces of this Houston offense, and I think Dell is somebody I want. I'm a little bit more interested in Nico Collins actually now that he signed a long-term contract, um, but I still think all three of those wide receivers are going to be relevant this year, and it's going to be wild down in Houston
The
this
most
year.
interesting thing about Tank Dell, and we'll kind of wrap it up with this here, but just looking at his game logs last year, the most interesting thing I'm seeing here, his big games, his really productive games. He had so many touchdowns. Pretty much every week was a valuable fantasy week last year. Now, touchdowns aren't always the stickiest of stats. If he doesn't get the touchdown, that's where he really hurt you last year. But at the same time, a lot of his really big yardage games, yards per target, the games where he went off are the games where his yards per target were much, much higher. They used him down the field where they got him into space and he was able to create that way. It's going to be interesting to see how they use him, Nico, and Diggs because I don't think Diggs is going to be playing the slot. I think Tank Dell will be more of the slot guy. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe with the older Diggs, they kind of put him in the slot a little bit more. But I would have trouble predicting that for Diggs. I would think he'd be more of the outside guy. And Dell, if he, just based on what I'm seeing here from his game logs, if he's used closer to the line of scrimmage, he's not targeted down the field, he's still able to produce after the catch, but it's just limited because he's so much closer. He's not able to get those big bomb weeks in terms of yardage. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how they use him. But again, Tank Dell's a good player, and I don't want to hate on him unnecessarily. I do think he's a really good player. I just think that his value is just so high. It's just so juicy for me to sell right now. So
Yeah, and again, I get that, but I like having some pieces and kind of see where it's going to go. Maybe for a year, like
sure.
if you're a contending team, I'd keep them.
I mean, if you can trade him 1 for 1 for like for George Pickens, I would explore that at least, see if you can work something like that. But I know you're a little bit less of a George Pickens guy, but even DJ Moore though, like if you could get DJ Moore for Tank Dell, again, it's just the number ones versus the number 2 or 3 for their team. So that's pretty much it. Again, I like the talent of Tank Dell, and I think this is a fair ranking in terms of his value. So, all right, let's go to the next guy here. Going to be Jalen Hyatt, drafted by the New York Giants at 310. This was a little bit of a surprise. I didn't really see this coming. I'm going to be interested to see how they treat this offense this year with Jalen Hyatt being a little bit, he's got a little bit more experience under his belt. Last year was kind of a complete nightmare for the entire team. They unfortunately made Jalen Hyatt kind of the deep threat. They didn't really use him. They didn't really pass the ball very well. It was like Saquon Barkley or bust for this entire team last year. Saquon's gone now. They're back to Daniel Jones. They do bring in Drew Lock to compete with him. Hopefully we don't have to see Tommy DeVito this year. That was a fun story, but sayonara, kid. Devin Singletary's back in the backfield. They draft Malik Neighbors, which is the big addition to be the number 1 for this team, which is a perfect fit because now Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, these guys kind of fall to the 2 and 3. I know you weren't the biggest fan of Jalen Hyatt last year, but how are you feeling about him now? Last year, he had 23 catches for 373 yards. Obviously, he had the Tank Dell treatment when he got the catches. Sure. He was very explosive, but just not a lot of volume last year.
Daniel Jones is a quarterback, or Drew Lock. I still don't like Jalen Hyatt.
Okay.
Personally, I'm not in at all. Like, I guess at cost, he's a nice dart throw.
Sure.
But I feel he's just clogging up my roster, and I don't really want him on my team personally. I kind of feel in my head he's like another. I go back to Paris Campbell. Like I love Paris Campbell as a player, blah blah blah, but like not gonna do anything for me. Like I don't feel Jalen. I feel there's too many wide receivers in this room, and we don't really know who's going to break out. Like Darius Slayton's still there. He's like forever old. Like I'm surprised.
He's actually not that old, which is crazy.
Well, he feels old.
I know he does. He feels ancient, but
yes. They have him. They have Wan'Dale Robinson, Isaiah McKenzie's there. They have a lot of guys. I'm not saying that they're good, but like I get Jalen Hyatt was fairly touted, as a good wide receiver in college, coming out of Tennessee, but I don't feel he really fits this offense, and I'm not sure if Dayball can get him some gadget plays, but I kind of feel Wan'Dale's the gadget guy, and like I don't know, it's a weird fit with him being in New York, and I'm out.
Fair enough. I do like it though with Malik Neighbors. Like this offense is fast, man. That's the one thing that they've got going for them.
It is. I agree.
They're like the NFC Miami is what it feels like they're trying to be. They just need a Tua essentially at quarterback. Now Daniel Jones obviously last year had the injuries. I don't really like Daniel Jones that much as a quarterback, but you go back 2 years ago, I don't know. It's hard to say because this offensive line has just been so bad, and they tried to improve that in this offseason. They haven't had it's been the craziest combination. They've had Saquon Barkley with no offensive line and no receivers for like 4 years now. So, they bring in Malik Neighbors finally to be the number 1 here after they lose Saquon. It's like, man, what you guys could have done if you would have just had a number 1 wide receiver. But I do like Malik Neighbors and Jalen Hyatt. Like I do think that the speed of of Malik Neighbors is going to potentially open up Jalen Hyatt a little bit more for some bombs down the field because people are going to be very scared about Malik Neighbors because they're not going to use Malik Neighbors as their deep threat, whereas Jalen Hyatt is more of the deep threat. So again, at cost, I kind of like him a little bit more. He's going behind Brendan Rice. Like, I understand Brendan Rice is the son of a Hall of Famer, but Devontae
Yeah.
Walker, Brandon Cooks, and Brendan Rice and Elijah Moore. That's the range that he's going. Like we
Yeah,
kind of
I mean,
know.
I'm fine with taking a dart throw, but I I just feel that like I like tail in a draft. I'm fine
Yeah.
doing that. I'm fine doing that, seeing what he is, but I don't want to have very much at all.
Yeah, and again, he's the number 83 wide receiver, and I think a lot of these guys we're going to talk about here today are pretty low value in terms of that. But yeah, it's just for me, it's just crazy because I do think that there's some potential here in terms of what he could do. We don't know anything yet about Jalen Hyde in his future. He's only a year two player, didn't play a ton in year one. He had an average number of snaps, multiple games with 30%, some was 70, some was 60, 50, picked up in the back half of the year. But again, it's just, it was kind of an up and down season. So I want to watch him, but I'm with you. I can see people being a little
Yeah,
out
and
on him.
and I think for me, I'm just kind of out on these. Like I love watching these fast boom bust guys, but
Mm,
I think I'm just kind of out on these guys until I see somebody consistent enough, like be like Tyreek Hill, I guess for
right.
me. I understand that's a very extreme example, but just being consistent enough, like being able to get it's these short catches, and taking them to the house, like I need to see more of that
Mm-hmm.
on a consistent basis to feel, I mean, I would feel much better about those, obviously. I need to see that. I need to see more of that and them more integrated into the offense than.
Yeah, and I will say the one nice thing with him too, and this is one of his benefits coming out of Tennessee, like only 23 catches, but averaging 16 yards per catch. Man,
Right.
he was explosive. So you kind of find a way to scheme him open a little bit more, and maybe again Malik Neighbors can help with that. I do think that there's something there for sure, and he's only 22 years old. So again, an interesting dart throw to take a chance on. Now we're going to talk about his Tennessee teammate really quickly, Cedric Tillman, who was drafted by the Cleveland Browns one pick later. Very mediocre season as well. Started injured. He played a little bit of the snaps early on, got injured. Came back, and with Flacco, he actually was showing a little bit of promise. I believe, if I remember right, Amari Cooper got banged up a little bit, and that's where Cedric Tillman started showing a little bit on the field at the end of the year. But they still have Amari Cooper. They trade for Jerry Jeudy. They have Elijah Moore. You'd imagine that Cedric Tillman is kind of behind Amari Cooper in terms of the depth chart. So there's a chance that Amari Cooper gets banged up and Tillman could see a lot of play time. But what are your thoughts on Tillman?
I think he's interesting. I'm not really excited about Deshaun Watson being quarterback. That I would much rather have old man Joe Flacco.
Right.
But to be very
Jameis is there
honest,
too. I'm really.
yes, yes, and Jameis is fun he'd be fun with that offense. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think Amari Cooper has an expiring contract here coming up.
I believe so.
I believe.
I'll pull it up. Well,
I, be-
you keep
I
talking.
Yeah, I believe so. So, if he hasn't, if this is the last year of his contract, I'm not sure if they're going to extend him. It's his unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, there we go.
I think that could be really spicy if that happens. So,
He'll be
I think
31 as well. So yeah.
right. He's going to be older, So I feel pretty good about that. In all honesty,
Mm-hmm.
I would of the guys we talked about, so far, like I would want to take a stab on him. And
Mm-hmm.
well, I mean, obviously, I like Tank Dell, but
Right.
I would be happy to take a stab on him and like maybe throw a trade, and see what we can kind of get going. I probably wouldn't trade anything,
You can get him
a
for
high price.
fourth right now, which is,
Right.
you know,
Nothing.
yeah, he's so far
Yeah,
below like everyone else. Like Deonta Foreman is in the same range as him. You're talking Juju Smith-Schuster, which yeah, that's funny.
that is
Tutu
fair.
Atwell, Bub Memes, um, Josh Reynolds, or I think I said Josh
Right.
Reynolds, but yeah, like there is
Right.
nobody in his range.
Yes.
So he's
Yeah.
basically
Yes. And
free.
Yeah, and with that, like if they move on from Amari Cooper, like he's gonna be at least the two, like if not the
Right.
one. I'm still not sold on Jerry Judy, but I mean they did give him a contract. That's beside the
Right.
point. But
Right.
so he's gonna be. I feel he's gonna be relevant potentially this year. I mean, not as much this year, but I think he has a chance to start making some strides and us seeing a little bit more out of this.
Yeah, definitely a name to watch. And again, the with the Cleveland Browns, and the Deshaun Watson contract that they have for him,
Saga.
like next year he's a next year Deshaun Watson is a $64 million cap hit.
That's gross.
64 million.
That's
It's nuts, man. They're right now they're 64 million over the cap for 2025. So everyone's saying, well, they'll probably just draft a guy next year to replace Amari Cooper. I don't know, man. Like they're going to be cutting and scraping. I think that they could.
Well, I will say that the big thing is that they're finally going to have a first round pick.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm just saying that
So
I don't think they'll
so
use it
so so
necessarily on that.
right,
That's
right.
that's
I
all.
don't I don't I don't disagree with that, but like at least now they're kind of past the point. I mean, yes, financially, like they still
Right.
have Watson, but like at least past the pick point where they're able to kind of start rejuvenating some of that and to start doing more of that roster construction through the draft compared to free agency and
Right. So yeah, he's just somebody that I think is worth a throw in a trade for another
yes,
player.
yep,
Like he's the perfect throw in right now because you throw him on your taxi squad, you just wait and then you see what happens next year. I could see him spiking in value again if they don't draft a guy next year. They're not signing anybody. Essentially, is what we're kind of saying here in free agency. They're going to be struggling to get under the cap next year. So they're not going to be bringing in a lot of free agents. And all of a sudden, you have a wide receiver core of Cedric Tillman and Jerry Jeudy. And let's say, just, for example, I know that a lot of people don't want to talk about this, but let's say that Deshaun Watson gets back to his old form. All of a sudden, man, Cedric Tillman could be very, very nice for fantasy football. So just a name to keep on your radar. And I think that like I said, he is basically completely free. You can get
yes,
4 of him for 1 Jalen Hyatt right now is what his value
yeah,
is ranked at, which is crazy.
which is nuts. And I would much rather have Tillman than Hyatt.
Yeah. I mean, I could see it.
Just on
So
just on the potential of what we could see here in the next year.
fair enough. Fair enough. All right, let's go to the next player here, which is going to be Josh Downs with the Indianapolis Colts. He was drafted at 316. So all these guys went in the top half of the third round. So a lot of interest last year. This was a smaller group for the most part. The two we just talked about, obviously Tank Dell is tiny. He's a smaller guy. So is Josh Downs. He's a shorter, smaller guy. Whereas Tillman and even Hyatt, they're taller. Hyatt is very skinny, but Tillman's the more prototypical kind of X guy. But yeah, Josh Downs, 5'9", 170. So he's just tinier. Had a little bit of a stretch last year where he showed a lot of potential in the middle of the season with Gardner Minshew, but I don't know what to expect from him going forward. He had 68 catches for 771 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not great on the touchdowns, but most of that work was with Gardner Minshew, him and Anthony Richardson. I mean, to be fair, the 4 games that Anthony Richardson played, right, or the 3.5, I guess, he did have, what is this, quick numbers, 24 targets in those 3 games. So averaging 8 targets a game, not bad, more than I would have thought. And then kind of up and down from there with Minshew. The team, Anthony Richardson will be back. The team drafted Adonai Mitchell as the number 2, 3. Who knows who's going to be the 2 and who's going to be the 3? Is Downs going to be moving primarily to the slot, or is that going to be more of Mitchell? I don't know as of right now. So, is Adonai Mitchell the Alec Pierce replacement on the outside, and Downs goes full time to the slot? If that's the case, I could see him being valuable in PPR as your, like potential flex play. But I'm personally just a little nervous about him. I think he's a little overrated personally.
That's fair.
he's wide receiver number 55, going in the Roman Wilson, Romeo Dubs, Jermaine Burton range. Like, I would take all three of those guys hands down over one Josh Downs right now. You know,
Well, I think a lot of that is because Anthony Richardson's going to be the quarterback.
people are high on him though, man.
Well, I don't disagree. I think the only pass catcher I want out of this offense is Michael Pittman, and
I
I'm
agree.
not super pumped about it. And I mean, I like what Indy's doing, and and what they're trying to build around Anthony Richardson, which he's still a very raw prospect,
Right.
obviously, and coming off a shoulder injury, stuff like that. So, I think what we got out of Josh Downs is what we should expect. I don't think it's gonna be about that. It's gonna be about, I think did get a little uptick in, targets and receptions because of Gardner Minshew.
Right.
But I think, a middling play, a middling wide receiver that you can throw in on a bye week, what you're gonna kind of get at.
Sure. Like another guy who was pretty decent. He was green in the yards per catch. He was very good after the target. After he made the catch. But
Yep.
yeah, again, he's a name that is interesting at least to me. But again, if I can move him for Roman Wilson, if I can move him for Romeo Dubs or Jermaine Burton, any of those three straight up, I am taking that hands down for sure, because
Right.
I just think that the upside on those guys is a lot
He's
higher.
more well, and again, it's because Anthony Richardson.
I don't even think it's that. Like,
That's. I mean, I know what we saw with Josh Downs when he had Drake May at UN.
right.
And
But that's college, though.
But he was still electric. He still produced with multiple quarterbacks.
I
Sam
agree.
Howell
I'm not
and
saying that
with
he's a
Drake
bad
May.
player.
So,
I'm more
so,
saying that
I
he was tiny which is fine in college. Like, you can get away with that a little bit more in college, where
right. I hear that, but I don't necessarily care the size. I
right.
like to see the production. Like what we saw with Tank Dell,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So like the size doesn't bother me. It's just I think this is a more run first offense, and a
Right.
more kind of that's what this offense is. And
Well,
I
yeah,
don't,
and that I'm not
yeah,
disagreeing with you on that. I'm saying
yeah,
the reason why I'm a little bit more nervous about him is not Anthony Richardson related. It's more Adonai Mitchell related. I mean, who's going to be the number 2? Like, is Josh Downs going to be the number 4 target essentially for this team? And if that's the case, then dude,
sure.
like, I don't know. That's
No,
where I
I
think that
I
the
agree.
risk
Yeah,
is, right? Where Jelani Woods, they're talking him up again, and he was always like an athletic superstar, like an athletic freak, and it was going to take a little bit of time to kind of get him in line. But like, if Michael Pittman and Adonai Mitchell are the 1 and the 2, and let's say Jelani Woods is the number 3 in terms of targets, like, all of a sudden Josh Downs is just not valuable. But at the same time, if it's Michael Pittman, then Josh Downs, then Jelani Woods, and then Adonai Mitchell is the 4, like, the problem is I just don't know who the 2 and the 4 is between Downs and Mitchell. And that's where there's a lot of risk, but some potential reward. If Downs is the 2, I'm not that concerned about Anthony Richardson. I think that he can still kind of make Downs fine for fantasy. It's just, can he get that target share? That's what I'm kind of
right.
concerned about. So, all right. So yeah, a lot of risk with Josh Downs. If you can move him for one of those other more guaranteed 2s, I think that's what we would both do. It sounds like. But
Yeah, I would.
so yeah, a little bit of risk there, but some potential reward. So if you're a gambling man, you can definitely go out there and take a stab on Josh Downs, and you can potentially have a big payoff for sure. So, all right, next guy here is going to be a guy that I've already talked about, which is going to be Michael Wilson. Again, I did the Arizona backfield breakdown a couple weeks ago. 3rd round pick. I feel like a lot of people forget that he was a 3rd round pick, and it feels like a lot of people think that Michael Wilson was like a 5th rounder or something like that. Like, I don't know why, but it just feels like nobody cares about this guy whatsoever as the number 2. And, a lot of people are talking about him in OTAs and training camp as being the number 2 for this team. Obviously, right after that video, they brought in Zay Jones to play with this team. They still have Greg Dortch. They have Zach Pascal, some guys, but they're mostly Jags. I think that there's a lot of potential for Michael Wilson. He's only 24 years old. As a rookie, didn't have Kyler for most of the season, was banged up when Kyler came back. He only had 2 full games with Kyler Murray at the end of the year. And in those games, had 10 catches for about 135 yards. Not terrible. 1 touchdown in those 2 games. So, we don't know what him and Kyler are going to do on the field, but I do believe that there's a lot of potential here around Michael Wilson. Am I crazy here?
I see it. I see it. And I know we keep joking that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to get 1,000 targets and 1 billion yards.
He will.
And
who's going to?
I know he still probably will. But if I will go off of the Tank Dell example I had earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that Marv gets 1,500 yards, and if we're projecting Kyler maybe has 4,000 to 4,200 yards, like that's still a lot of yards.
3,800 yards, like who's it going to?
Yeah, exactly. And I think quite a bit of that's going to go to Michael Wilson. I don't disagree with that. I can see it's going to be Marv, it's going to be Michael Wilson and Trey McBride.
Yeah,
like those are going to be a lot of guys. A sprinkle of Zay Jones. A sprinkle.
Even James Conner, Trey Benson, they have decent hands. Yep. Like they're going to probably get a couple hundred yards, but it's just there's so much opportunity for Michael Wilson. Again, he was a 3rd-round pick. He's got this is what it just blows my mind with Michael Wilson. He's got the draft capital. He's got the size. He's 6'2", 213 pounds. Like he has a good system, a good quarterback around him. He has the opportunity. It's just like everything is there for Michael Wilson, and nobody cares. It's just like, all right,
right.
Cool.
It's because a lot of people are off Arizona. I think Arizona is going to be
sneaky good,
competitive. Man. Yeah, it's going to be competitive this year. I'm not sure how good they're record-wise they're going to be, but I think they're going to be much more competitive. And I think
they're going to be good, man. Like you look at last year, they were winning against the Eagles. They were winning against the Cowboys.
They beat Dallas, and
they were competitive in a lot of those games that they lost.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
But I do think they're going to be consistently more competitive.
Yes. Yeah.
And stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm not saying that Michael Wilson's going to have 1,000-yard season, but I would not be shocked if he does.
Right. And again, he had 565 yards last year as a rookie on 38 catches. All the guys who talked about their yards per catch numbers are pure green, right? They're all just busting off big runs after the catch as rookies, which you just love to see. Like that just means that they are very explosive players. And again, you give him 17 games with Kyler, and I do think that you're saying 1,000 yards. I think he could easily get to 1,000 yards. In 2 games with Kyler, he had 130 yards or 140 yards. So, it's not nothing, but you average 70 yards a game over a whole season. You're easily breaking that 1,000 yards.
Oh, yeah,
so
absolutely. So
I think that there's potential, man.
Yeah, and that's very reasonable. So, like, what would you be willing to trade for him? Which I know you would trade heaven and earth to have him on.
I mean,
but let's be
to be honest with you, like I'm crazy here. I would give if you think you're going to be a contender, and it's always risky because.
Are you going to say a first?
No.
Michael Wilson.
I was going to say a second, like a 2025. A 2025 second. If you think you're going to be a contender, and you're going to have a late second next year, I would be willing to give it to him. I don't think you have to. I think you could give a third and maybe get him straight up. Maybe you have to sweeten it up a little bit, and that's where I think a second just gets it done. But a third, he's valued as like a high 4th right now, and that's where. I don't know many people that are going to move him. I've tried to get him for like a third in a couple of leagues, and it's not going well. Like people don't want to give him up for that. So it's like people inherently know that he's got more value than what people want to draft him as. But it's just a weird situation that I don't fully understand. And I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. From Zoolander, man. It's just, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like nobody wants this guy. Nobody wants to give him up. Nobody wants to take any trade for him. And it's like, what is happening with Michael Wilson, man?
I feel there's also a lot of unknown
Yeah.
with the addition of Zay Jones. I think that will turn some people off because
Yeah.
because Zay's an established player, stuff like that. But
Right.
I think his time has passed, and I think Michael Wilson's going to be. I'm not saying he's gonna be the number 2 in this offense. He's gonna be, the third or fourth guy on the totem pole, but still, like, he's gonna get his.
Right. For sure. For sure. Okay, let's go to the next guy here. We're going to speed up through the next few after this guy, probably. This is the last real guy to even talk about here today. But we're going to be talking about I'm flipping them on accident. Dontavian Wicks was actually taken before the next guy we're going to talk about. Dontavian Wicks was drafted at the 42nd pick in the 5th round, the 24th pick in the 5th round. The other guy was the 42nd pick. All those comp picks, man. That's a lot of comp picks. 24th pick in the 5th round. Dontavian Wicks last year. I don't get it, man. I really don't. He had a few games late in the year where his best game was 6 for 97. Like, there was a game where he had 2 touchdowns, and so he had one good, like, that was the last game of the year in week 18 where nobody plays fantasy anyway. But I don't know, man. I don't see it again. He was good in the yards per target, good in the yards per catch, but this offense is so loaded. Like, what are we doing here? Jaden Reed, everyone wants Jaden Reed. You got Romeo Doubs. You've got Christian Watson, who, if he's healthy, man, there's no chance that you're going to play Dontavian Wicks over Christian Watson if Watson is healthy. You've got the 2 tight ends. You've got Josh Jacobs. Like, this offense is loaded. What value does Dontavian Wicks have for fantasy? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, I think he benefited from a 20% less of I can't remember his name. Christian Watson.
Watson's hamstring.
Yeah.
Right.
Of his hamstring that's not there. I feel he benefited quite a bit from that.
I don't even know if it's a benefit though. That's what I'm saying. Like, he had 2 good games
well,
all year,
well,
15 and 24 points.
He benefited from the playing time.
Oh, for sure.
I'll say that. So like, he was okay. Like, he wasn't great, but I mean, I know we've been enamored with these guys out of Green Bay. Like, it was Romeo Doubs a couple years ago. It was Romeo Doubs again last year.
Right.
And yeah, so I think they have their 2 guys with Jaden Reed and Christian Watson. Like they have their tight end. I feel they want to be a running team. Like, especially getting Josh Jacobs. Having Marshawn Lloyd and AJ Dillon. It's not really a passing team.
I think it's a passing team. I think it's a balanced team. I don't think it's one or the other.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, I was about to say more like a play action team.
Right. Yeah, that's perfect. Yes. Very play action.
So, but I don't really think he's going to get a lot of playing time. Problem.
Even if he does, it's like,
it's not super great. Like, he's a guy you can throw on potentially on a bye week.
Yeah.
And maybe get
hope for the touchdowns. But it's just,
I mean,
it's crazy.
Yeah,
to me,
man. I would rather potentially roster him than like Hyatt.
Oh, for sure. So real quickly, let's talk about his value really quickly. Like, so yeah, you're thinking he's valued like Jalen Hyatt, right? He's not. This is his value. These are the guys that are going after him. Jerry Jeudy, Jahan Dotson, Courtland Sutton. He's going ahead of them.
Interesting.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Like, his value is insane. Like, I do not understand it. I'd rather all of those guys have the potential to be the 2 for their team. Dontavian Wicks is the 4. He's the 4. Like, what are we doing?
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm okay.
Courtland Sutton could be the 1 for his team, for all we know.
He kind of.
He is the number 1. So, like, I just think that Dontavian Wicks is entirely overvalued, and if you can cash out, like, he's 1 spot behind Jermaine Burton. Like, okay.
Yeah.
All these guys have the potential to be established top 24 guys this year. Dontavian Wicks, he'll be lucky if he's a top 36. There's no way. There's no chance. 2 good games all last year, guys. I am very definitively putting my foot down that Dontavian Wicks is not going to be a thing. He's like Fetch. It's not going to be a thing, guys.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so let's move on.
All right, let's
Let's
go to the
move
next
on.
guy.
Come on.
Next guy, Puka Nakua, is the guy I almost jumped in front of
Puka.
Dontavian
Yeah.
Wicks. I just didn't want to talk Wicks, so that's why I ignored him. No, Puka Nakua drafted as the 42nd pick in the 5th round, comp pick. Entirely too low, it seems. We were all wrong on Puka Nakua. This dude is a
This
superstar,
guy had such a
man.
garbage year, Calvin. Come
Oh
on,
my
man.
Lord, dude. 160 targets, 105
He went
receptions for
bananas.
1,486 yards and 6 touchdowns. And people are going to say, well, that's not sustainable. It's probably not. But, dude, he doesn't even need to be like, if he gets, let's say he goes down by 20%. Let's say he gets 85 receptions this year. That's still over 1,000 yards for him, and that's probably 4 to 5 touchdowns. Like
as long as Stafford's throwing him the ball,
yeah,
he's gonna do just fine. He's gonna do just fine.
And you have McVay. McVay's whole thing is, if you prove you're a good player, he will feature you and feed you like no other. And that's what Puka Nakua did last year. They didn't draft a guy this last draft. They kept it completely him and Cooper Kupp. Like, it's going to be Puka season, baby. It's going to be all Puka this upcoming year.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot. And with Cooper Kupp, being out the first 4 weeks, that really got to showcase Puka.
Yeah.
And I feel they can coexist together.
They did most of the season. Like,
Yes,
that's what's crazy.
So,
everyone said, "Oh, he's coming back. You're screwed." Like, Puka, sell him now while you can.
so I feel fine having either of those guys. I mean, obviously, I'd rather at this point.
Oh yeah,
obviously.
for sure.
But I feel both of them together, and I think that's really important, and that's going to be really interesting to what the Rams do. Because I felt the Rams had they had a better than expected year. I feel like last year, like they played really well, and they performed a lot better than what people expected, especially with Cooper Kupp's injury in the beginning of the year and stuff like that. So, I think you really have to hold Puka. I don't think you can. I don't know yet.
Would you sell him?
I'm not sure.
So he's currently the wide receiver 7. Garrett Wilson
right.
is behind him. Malik Neighbors is behind him. Chris Olave. Would you take any of those guys over Puka Nakua?
And I love me some Garrett Wilson, but he's also in. That's terrifying in itself. It is. So, I mean, I feel he's pretty properly rated. I mean, maybe a slot or two.
Rating wise, yes, I agree with you that he's correct. If he does take, like, let's say it's a 20% reduction, there's no way he's going to finish as highly as he did this last year, which was wide receiver number 4. But Sam Laporta is equally valued right now. In a super flex, Kyler Murray. Like, the question, it all comes down to, is he a fluke? Right? That's the entire question.
Right. I hear that.
I don't know.
As long as Stafford and McVay are there, he'll be fine. As long as Stafford's throwing him the ball and not back up as Jimmy G.
Right.
If Jimmy G and Stetson Bennett are throwing him the ball, I mean, even at that, like, I still think it's gonna be fine. So
yeah, with McVay, I mean,
I think he's gonna be fine.
The question is just the upside. Can he sustain that?
So,
and would you rather have the potential for, because here's the thing. He finished as wide receiver 4 this year. I think that was probably, teams will have tape on him a little bit more now. They'll know how to kind of shut him down a little bit better this year. I think his production and his efficiency are going to come down a little bit. Doesn't mean he's not going to still be good. He could still be a top 12 wide receiver. The question is whether or not you think that he could be someone who can finish as a top 4 yet again. And I don't know if I'm willing to bet on that. I'm afraid to bet against it.
I would agree with that, because there's so many great wide receivers now. There's 20 wide receiver ones. It feels,
right.
So I'm not saying, I think he's going to finish top 10, but like if like in the first couple of weeks, if he spikes, it might be a good time to sell him at that point.
Hmm.
I'm not saying necessarily at peak value, but at a really, really good value, and try to get a haul for him.
Right. Like if you could sell him for, dude, like Olave and Neighbors, man, I think that they're going to be. I could see both of those guys making the case to be top 5 guys. Like I really do. I think Olave is going to bounce back a little bit this year, but Neighbors, like everybody was hot on Neighbors, and I feel like Neighbors is just devalued because of Daniel Jones. But if this team uses him and just whether it's Tyrod Taylor, Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, whoever's Tommy Cutlets, I don't care who's throwing him the ball. I think Malik Neighbors could definitely still finish as a top 10 guy this year as a rookie in a not great situation. If you could sell Puka Nacua for Neighbors plus, man, that's hard for me to turn down. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
So
I agree. I agree with
again, I love Puka Nacua, and I think this is entirely fair. It's just I'm scared to death of of keeping him this high. Is he Icarus
it.
flying too close to the sun? I have no idea. I have no idea. To be fair, I do have him as my dynasty wide receiver number 8, so I'm right here with him. But it feels like Kyron Williams a little bit of it's a little scary.
Right.
All right, last 2 guys, we're going to talk through both of them really quickly. So Parker Washington is another name to kind of keep in mind. Now, we're not going through every wide receiver. We're skipping a few of these guys that did absolutely nothing as a rookie, didn't even get talked about. So we're kind of picking and choosing a little bit here. But Parker Washington, 6th-round pick by Jacksonville. I liked him a lot coming out. He showed a little bit at the end of last year, was banged up, didn't get on the field pretty much at all until week 13. In his last few games, in week 13 against Cincinnati, he had 6 catches on 6 targets for 61 yards and a touchdown. After that, he only had 1 game with 4, and then the rest of them 1 or 2 targets and 1 or 2 completions. So really didn't do much outside of that first game. A little bit of buzz around him, but I do think that he's kind of dead right now. I mean, they still have Christian Kirk. They drafted Brian Thomas, Gabe Davis, Evan Ingram, like Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne. Is there any hope for Parker Washington?
It's not looking super good. I mean, he's somebody to watch out for, but I'm I've said this before. I'm kind of off on the Jags and what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big fan of Trevor Lawrence. I think the he's pretty mid, and that's not bad. But like you want a good quarterback. I feel like Christian Kirk's contract is going to be expiring this year. So that's a potential help, but it could be
They could re-sign him though
interesting.
too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and they could, but I I don't know where Parker Washington's going to fit this offense, if he
Right.
really fits anywhere. And like them, drafting Brian Thomas, that doesn't help the situation. But they also brought Gabe Davis, who does stuff similar to Brian. I don't really know what they're doing
it's
down
more
there.
down the field stuff, and that's where I think
Yeah,
that
yeah,
Parker
yeah.
Washington kind of loses out a little bit there. So yeah, I think there was a little bit of hype, and you do see a few reports out there right now about him, kind of hyping him up a little bit, but I don't really think he's ever going to be anything,
Yeah, I'm
especially
not.
with the
Yeah,
draft
I'm not.
capital.
Yeah, I'm not feeling great about it. I'm okay to kind of bounce off of it.
Yep. The last guy we're going to talk about here really quickly was Demario Davis, and I just closed the document where he got drafted. But he was another 6th-round pick last year by the Patriots. Now, unlike Park Washington, he was actually pretty productive in a terrible system with a terrible team. He's a smaller guy, 5'8", 192. But he has a lot of potential this year with Drake May coming in. I do think Drake May is going to be the number 1 quarterback at the start of the year. I think that they're just going to give it to him and try and get as many reps from him as possible. I don't think this team is under any misconceptions that they're going to be a contender right now. They know that they have a lot of
Right.
holes, and why not just get Drake May all the reps that they can? So, Demario Douglas is the kind of the leader of the pack here in terms of wide receivers. I mean, Juju's still here, Tyquan Thornton, Jalen Rager. These names are all names that you've probably heard in the past. Kendrick Bourne. They're fun names, but they did draft Jalen Polk in the second round. I do think that Jalen Polk is very underrated for Dynasty right now. That's a topic for another day. But Javon Baker is another guy that it's a very crowded wide receiver room, and I do think that Demario Douglas, with what he showed as a rookie, has some potential to to make a name for himself in this receiving core. 49 catches for 561 yards as a rookie, again, in a terrible, terrible team. So just a name to keep an eye on. And if you want to take a stab in a year's time, if you told me Demario Douglas was the number 1 wide receiver for the Patriots, I would not be shocked. And again, his value, he's estimated as a late 3rd round pick. It's basically free. You can get him as a throw into any trade, essentially. So
yeah, and you might as well take the dart throw. I'm okay with that. I'm surprised you're not sizist against this guy too.
That's because he's a Patriot.
I know. But
that
still,
Navy makes him look bigger.
It does. It definitely does. So, yeah. But for him, I'm fine with taking a dart throw on him. I think he could be something.
Yeah.
He could definitely be like a bye week filler. Real easy. So
he could be the number 1 too. Like, let's say he becomes Drake Mays. We talked about Josh Downs a little bit earlier in the show, and you love Josh Downs with Drake May at UNC, and it was because Drake May just trusted him, right? And if Demario Douglas can be that guy for Drake May, you could be talking about, I don't think he's a top 12 guy, but you're talking like definitely flex worthy or top 24, bottom of the top 24. And for wide receivers, that's valuable week to week. So just a name to keep in mind. Again, he's the wide receiver number 80. Like, he's free. So why not take a stab on him? That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
So
agreed.
All right, that's the wide receivers. The rest of them, day 1 was a lot more fun than part 1 was more fun than part 2. But part 2 did have Puka. It has Tank. There's some decent names there. And again, there's some guys that could definitely break out. Tillman, Jalen Hyatt. We'll see what they can do this upcoming year. But yeah, dude, last year's draft wide receiver class is so interesting to see how they're all going to progress in the NFL. So, all right. Well, that said, thank you guys, everybody, for listening to this podcast. If you can, please follow us over on Twitter again one last time at TDC_Calvin, at Dynasty_Dale, at FF After Dark for the podcast. We're available on Spotify, Google, Apple, YouTube, everywhere the podcasts are found. Just search Dynasty After Dark. Subscribe to the channel. Helps us out there. And if you like all this content, leave a comment down below and tell us what team you want us to do a breakdown. I'm leaning towards the Patriots, man. I'm leaning, diving in, putting on my hazmat suit and just diving in there. So
I would need more than a hazmat. It is down and dirty over there.
I might need some life insurance, just it's like radioactive. It's like going to Chernobyl. So, yeah, we'll have a good time breaking that one down. We'll see. I might go towards the Panthers or somebody else here. So there's a few options, a lot of good teams to talk about.
So again, just comment down below, like whichever team you guys want us to do, or like any other topic ideas that like you guys want to hear from us.
Yeah, and humble Dale in the comments down below.
Please do.
The biggest thing. So, all right, any last thoughts, Dale?
Send it on home.
All right, well, thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, have a good night.
And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be?